You know, there are a lot of authentic characters around hemp. So I'm now going to introduce you to one of the most authentic characters in industrial hemp. Steve Allin is one of the first people that I met doing anything with industrial hemp. My interest in hemp started with construction. And if you Google Steve Allin, or if you Google hemp construction, you'll find him right there at the top. So Steve brings, again, another 25 years experience to the hemp industry, and that puts us up to somewhere around 150 years of combined experience. You ready, guys? Okay.
I'm ready.
I'm very honored to introduce you to Steve Allin.
Right, okay. You can all hear me, I guess. This microphone's a bit weird, but hopefully it'll work. Hopefully I won't get that booming sound. Right, so I'm Steve. I don't know about this genuine character business, but how did I get into hemp? Well, it was about 45 years ago. I was 15, so it's longer than that. It was 47, 48 years ago. God, time flies, especially when you're having fun. So I was sat around with my young friends, 15 years old, and somebody rolled a joint and they passed it around. So I became a criminal 3 different ways in one go, right? First of all, somebody passed me a spliff. I was in possession. I then passed that to somebody else. I was guilty of supply. And because we were sat in a circle, we were a drugs ring. We were making a conspiracy. And that conspiracy, it seems to me from that distance now, was really a conspiracy to be smart. To rebel against this dull monotony we were being taught and say, no, there must be something better than this, surely. And I think there is. So yeah, Kirk suggested this title, and it wouldn't have necessarily been a title that came to me, but I thought, okay, right, I'll try and focus my sort of delivery on this. So I guess this works. Does it for the next one? Yes, it does. So we're in Asia, and I thought, right, well, if we're going to start talking about hemp, we're going to talk about where we can grow it. Now, I've sort of made this map up, and you can see all the sort of bright greeny bits are where I reckon that it'd be easily possible to grow hemp, right? There are other areas there that might be possible, and there might be small little areas where it can be grown very well. But on a general way, this sort of area, it can be grown. Now, saying it can be grown is one thing. It's also not necessarily possible just because it seems like it's the right place that you can grow it, because there are a lot of other aspects of just growing a crop or changing to growing a crop. So these are aerial photographs of different countries in Asia, right? Now, that doesn't mean to say that every kind of agricultural activity in Asia is like this, but the vast majority, if you zoom in with Google Maps into any of the areas that might be considered to be an agriculturally suitable area for growing hemp, this is what you'll find. A little patchwork of fields. A patchwork because of the geography, that maybe it's very sloping, or that the water needs to be irrigated and flowing through the land in a particular way, or because of the social political scene of how people own the land. And so they might not even own a single block. It might be made up of lots of little individual blocks spread all over the place, whether this is in the west of Ireland, or whether it's in Thailand, or whether it's in South America. This can be very often the case. And so we can say that we have to slightly adjust the way we're thinking about how we're going to be producing hemp in Asia. It's not necessarily like this. From an industrial point of view, this is what industrialists like to see. They like to see big scale. And in some places this is possible. And this is very, very useful for feeding into a particular direction. But as I was told, I'm here to give a human approach. So what's a more human aspect of this? Right, well, in the majority of situations, small scale machinery and small-scale processes are likely to be used. Doesn't mean to say they have to be, although we should even aim at that, but it's just inevitable. And here I have a picture of a lady from the Hamon culture who's standing in a field which she will harvest by hand. And here we have a picture of a Chinese tractor that can operate in smaller spaces than some of these big machines, with just very simple machinery, just cutting it and laying it on the ground. And those sort of things will have to be considered, as well as the possibility for new types of machines that might be small and do a variety of different jobs, or bigger machines that are processing huge amounts in a small amount of time. The same can be said for once we have the material off the field, then what do we do with it? Now, surprisingly enough, some of the largest supplies for Chinese textile production in China has actually been done by these amazing women in their yards who can skin a hemp stem in a matter of seconds. And that's not easy, I can assure you, but they've got that system down. They end up literally with a huge stack of just the stripped stalks and hanks of fibre with a day's work that would just amaze you. But that's not realistic when it comes to what do we have on Earth for the future. We have the possibility of small machines that are made in China also, but these are very small scale and they're only really for more village situations. If we're going to go big scale, now we're lucky in a lot of parts of Eastern Europe especially, and I'm sure it's possible in areas of China and other Southeast Asian countries that there is old existing machinery. That is there, it's just a matter of finding it. Yeah, and sometimes that machinery will work fine the way it is, and other times you'll need to adjust it maybe a bit to make it maybe more efficient, or to actually process the materials that you're particularly producing. Or you might need to be a bunch of ingenious farmers, like the people on the right have created this machine. Just a bunch of farmers in France. They have a cooperative, and there's 13 farmers involved. They grow things like hemp seed and sunflower seed and rapeseed and various other crops. And they decided they wanted to do something with all the straw they were left behind. They knew they could make building materials. So they got together all these bits of machinery that were laying around their yards. And they put them together with dust extraction, and they made their own hemp processing machine for about 5,000 euros. And that was basically spent on the control board with all the electrical switches to control it. All the other bits they just happened to have, oh, I've got one of those, and I've got one of those, and put them all together. So those sort of things are possible as well. This is like a small community and providing building materials for a small community. You can go big scale, like the sort of thing that Daniel was talking about earlier, sort of thing that's happening in Canada now, and it's been happening in Europe for a good long while, where you've got these big factories and we're talking about tons per hour, and we're able to feed into big industry. As Phil was saying, the automotive industry likes guaranteed supplies, and so you've got to have large-scale stuff to be able to change things on that scale. And that's very good. Also, the byproducts of this will be a great feedstock for us in the building industry. But centralisation isn't always a good idea. And we need to make things local because of transportation costs. As Phil was talking about again, we're talking about bulky, lightweight materials, and so we don't want to be shipping them huge distances. We want to be creating them locally. And so to make the materials available, whether it's by big scale or small scale, is the first important thing. You've got to have the materials. So we're talking about all these scientific uses, but you've got to get the materials first. So once we have the materials, how do we make them into a building material? Well, the specifications for the wood chips are quite simple. They're not really complicated. They're particularly about sizes and proportions of sizes per weight and per volume. But apart from that, it's cleanliness. You want them to be fairly clean, don't want loads of dirt and dust and stuff in them particularly. But we have been able to achieve successful hemp building projects all over the world with a great variety of materials, and our association has a best practice guide which inside has the sort of specifications that we've developed for the type of quality materials you need. The binders, the stuff that sticks it all together to make it into a building material, can be all kinds of things. Again, people have a lot of suspicions that things have to be exactly as some formulated pre-mixed product that's being sold has to be, but once you know how to do that, it's not impossible anyway. So, let me just have a drink of water. So to get this raw material from the fields into any kind of product, never mind a building material, we have to have material development, we have to get these materials there on the floor, then we have to have the building skills to be able to use them, then we need to be able to produce an example so we can show people what we've done, and then we have to promote that system. So producing hemp in the correct form is not difficult, and we need to create these suitable binders. They've been based on lime to a certain extent, but we can add clays to them. We can create products that are made with limes that have particular qualities purely from the geology of the locality, as in both these products that set either quite slowly or set really fast. There are all kinds of variations, and it depends what we need and what sort of product, whether we're making bricks, or whether we're casting on site, whether we're doing spraying application. There are a lot of different approaches to that. But it's not impossible, it's not that difficult. Teaching can be great fun, as you can see here. I've building courses all over the world, but that's an amazing aspect of a reflection of how this material relates to society. In as much as it's not just all builders that come, there's all sorts of people. From women who might consider themselves to be housewives or teachers or activists or industrialists or managers, men that might be just builders or real hemp activists or teachers or whatever. So people from all kinds of sides, even from government sometimes, and that they all realise the fantastic ability to turn a raw material into their home, and a really good quality home. Building an example. So these are two classic sort of little examples of things we might achieve during a hemp building course. The one on the left is in Australia, the home of a real hemp activist, the man who's just hopefully legalised medical cannabis in Australia, because he managed to put himself on the line, got arrested, and proved his case as a doctor in court. Fantastic, Dr. Andy Catellaris. That's his house in Sydney, where we just built this little cabana for people to change and relax around the swimming pool. And then this is in Sweden on the right, where we built a little building in an office, but for people to come and see. That's very important, especially for adults. Children, you can tell them fairy stories and they'll believe all sorts of things. But adults are far more sceptical, especially the adults that work in regulatory bodies and government departments, government bodies. You go, oh yeah, but from what you've described to me, you're describing me this sort of silly little straw house that will fall down, no problem. When they actually touch it and see it, it's like, oh, I didn't realise it was like that. But I told you 100 times. Oh, no, but now I see it. Oh, that's no problem. You've got to get to that state. And the similar state would be for the people who might want to buy a hemp house. They need to see it. Now, marketing and promoting this thing is in a lot of ways really easy because of all the amazing connections and abilities this plant has. But one of the things that cannabis does is it connects all the brain cells in your head. That's one of these high aspects of the thing that a lot of people don't want to talk about. But getting high on cannabis is a result of all these connections. It also back right is a result of all these connections. So you can see here this little bit of a mind map that I've done. They're from herds, or the wood chips. I call them herds, some people call them shivs. Shivs is really a term that comes from the flax industry, but I'll use herds anyway. You can see it's the building, paper and bedding, but from all those things, just from the building you can see all the different connections that there are. And we can go all the way from the hemp out to all these different aspects, but we can start connecting maybe just from energy and see how it connects us to efficiency, it connects to the design, the fact that it's renewable, it's localized, it's balanced payments. I put balanced payments in there because people earlier were talking about finances and banking and all the rest of it, and we had a fantastic presentation by Dan Harrar, whose dad wrote a book about The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and that was all about guys in power being fooled by illusions, and money is an illusion. If the whole world goes a bit crazy and we have people at our door saying, have you got any food? I don't care how much money they got, I'm not going to give my food. So lots of aspects of, that it connects to. Again, if we go from just the design, all the aspects that has so far. From a marketing, like why do we want to use the material? It's a no-brainer. There's just so many reasons. So, why are these aspects involved? Do you really need to analyse? Well, a lot of people do. A lot of people, it's taken a long time to actually educate people about the problems. Climate change and resource depletion, all those kind of things. It's very hard for some people to have taken that on board, but nowadays people are starting to realise that there is a problem, that definitely the climate's a bit upside down, that plastic all over the place is not a good thing. So now, what do we do? What do we do about it? Now you've told me about this, what do we do? So solutions, we've got to realise that what we have are solutions, and that is really important, because there's a load of people, including the UN, who might be a dodgy institution in some ways, but they're, and in some ways, our last chance. As national politics is getting more and more crazy, some global body that is actually looking at the general well-being of everybody is not a bad idea. And they've come up with these 17 different goals that we should be aiming at to be able to get ourselves through the terrible thing we've created. And the thing about the use of hemp as a building material, it is attached to every single one of these. There's not one of these things that you can say, oh, it doesn't apply to. It does, because building is a very, very important activity that human beings do. It has an enormous impact, as any architect will tell you, on the way we live. Now, clothing and food is also very, very important, but the implications and impacts that building has are enormous. So, we have these problems: climate change, soil loss, resource depletion, and first world debt. Now, most people just want a safe place to live, right? That's the most thing people want. And you've got some really crazy situations happening now where we've got enormous amounts of people having to move from one part of the world to the other. And it's not because, oh, they want to come and sponge off your health service, as some people will say, especially in the likes of England. It's not because they all want to steal all your wealth. It's because where they're living is pretty bad. Really bad. So bad that they can't take their children to school anymore because the school's been bombed and their neighbours' heads are on sticks around the roundabout. Really bad. Bad, more bad than many you can imagine. So, we have to cope with the fact that we've got huge amounts of people moving from the parts of the world that we are partly responsible for damaging coming into the West. We have to address that. We have to address that with housing. We can also affect that the resource problem, which is also one of the things that are driving people out of their situations, is the resources are not there. That's also creating resources. It's a Kemoji, great phrase, that we have to create resources, because most wars are fought because of resources, not because of flags or that sort of thing. That's an illusion that they give you. It's about resources. Hey, they've got water, we haven't. They've got forests, we haven't. They've got gold, we haven't. That's what it's about. So, as it won't provide all the solutions, but now CBD, with oil, CBD, it becomes to be a bit of a sort of definite mantra in the last 3 or 4 years. If you've been involved in hemp for a long time, then it's quite a phenomenon. In the last few years, it's like, my God, what's going on? But it won't feed us. It won't clothe us, it won't solve our energy crisis, and it won't house us. And those are the really important things. Now, we might feel healthy, and we might feel we have great well-being while the world is collapsing, but is that really a good idea? I'm not so sure. So, we're entering a train wreck. What's going on is really crazy, and of course, coming to somewhere like Kathmandu, or where I've been working in Haiti, you go right up against the face of, my God, we sat on all this crazy decay and air pollution and dirt and disease. It's a train wreck that's coming, and it's coming everywhere. In the West, we've managed to keep our streets nice and clean, and we've dumped it all in a place where nobody can see it. But we are approaching, as a species, crazy. It's not hemp can save the planet, it's can it save us? The planet doesn't need us. We need to support ourselves and our society if we're going to have any future for our children, if you have them, or your grandchildren, as I do, have them. That's what's really important. So, yeah, it's great that we have a new medicine. Brilliant. But offering a plaster, a little plaster for a train wreck is not going to cause any solutions at all. So, we as an association work to gather all the information together. We try to make membership, especially for students, as cheap as possible, and for other members and for companies. We promote all the different people that are operating the system, and we've been using those resources in some ways to work in some countries that are very, very challenging environments. But it's working, and we're offering solutions. We have the solutions. It will be up to humanity whether they take up those solutions.
Questions?
Any questions? Any comments, questions? Please.
Here we are.
Hi.
So in South Africa we have a massive housing issue, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah.
How does somebody find a solution for that when our government is so incompetent? Like, how do we approach? Do we have to find an investor to approach you?
No, well, investors are one thing. It's really a question of the people who need that resource, the people who need that housing, for them to be able to speak and to make a voice heard. If you can help them make their voice heard, that might help. And you need the hemp, or at least you need other resources maybe that are similar to it. But it has been proved, as Phil was talking about Canaf, I think he was going to ask me a question about Canaf. Canaf isn't suitable because it's not hard enough as a substance, but hemp does. But there are other materials that might be able to be used. Sugar gas is one of them. But that we have to find ways of doing it, and then we're going to do it if you have. Now, if there is areas in South Africa where there is wild hemp grown, you can just harvest it without anybody making a fuss and use it, and then show them what you've done. Great. But Tony Bardney, who's the original hemp activist in South Africa, has built a fantastic home which has convinced a lot of people in government. But I think you have much bigger problems in South Africa than just resources. You have a political system that, it's facilitated by Western banks, put it like that, and that's the big problem.
So providing them with a voice is the most.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Hello, I'm Saurabh from India,
Yeah.
Hemp Solutions. I just wanted to know, do you also feel that THC is essentially needed for the healthcare along with CBD?
I would say that. I'd like to go a little bit further, in as much as that I think that there is definitely reasons to say, I would just like one certain element of the cannabis plant. But generally, the combined effect, some people call it a symphonic effect or whatever, is an important aspect of how not just medicines work, but food also. We got a lot of health shops, they used to be called, or hippie food shops, are now called whole food shops. And it's about the whole food, not just eating one tiny bit of it. Now, obviously, there are some parts of all sorts of things we use that we don't need. We don't need the shell of the bean or the nut or whatever necessarily to have a good diet. But that approach of eating things unprocessed is definitely a thing to advise. So I think that THC has all kinds of benefits, but one of them is definitely something that is tried to be demonized, the fact that it makes you high. And I think that with training,
Right, but the high
you can
is
get
also,
high in a positive way.
right. It also has a beneficial effect, right? The high which you get.
Well, I think so, yes.
Right.
And I think the society has tried to demonize it.
Right. All right, thank you.
Thank you for the insightful presentation.
Who's that? Sorry, right.
Thank you for the insightful presentation. One key question that I have in regards to emerging markets like India, keeping in mind that there's opportunity for the country dealing with problems like poverty and housing. What do you see being the primary drivers in India for the hemp market, whether that be functional food, CBD, hempcrete, specifically India? I'm just curious.
Well, in India, you already have an existing acceptance of cannabis as high drug element, which is usually the most contentious of all, every year in Shivratri, where it's the whole public gets high. But outside of that, I think food is probably one of the great issues in India. It's high quality food. The ability to be able to create food banks for security in communities by the growth of hemp seed, I think, would be a very important aspect. But the housing, of course, is enormous, especially when you look at all the shanty towns in every city in India, as I know very well. But that means using the material. And I think if you follow the way that Duraj and Evadita have been doing, and they will outline later on today and tomorrow, of using the wild material that's already there to start the process. And that will then hopefully lead on to agriculture and intentional planting of hemp in a greater scale in India. But as I was saying earlier, I was trying to illustrate is that most land is already being used. It's not as if there are acres and acres of land that aren't being used, but it's a matter of converting from things that wouldn't be so good, like genetically modified cotton, into hemp.
We have time for one more question. Anyone? Yeah, you were perfectly clear in... Oh, sorry. Where?
Yeah, thank you very much. Great presentation. Just wondering what your thoughts were on hemp being used for soil remediation and pollution cleanup. I guess it's a massive.
I think it's a
deal with in the future.
Yep, I understand your question completely, and I just happened to have been talking to a young lady who's starting up a company to try to promote this in England when I was in Vienna last year. And I've been meaning to communicate with her again since I came back about another aspect of what I thought she was doing. And the initial stories that come about remediation from, or phytoremediation with cannabis, come from around Chernobyl, where there were some tests done as to how well it could remove radioactivity, which it could do. But then, of course, you have the problem of radioactivity is now in the hemp. And so what do you do with that? But if you need to remove it from one place to another, you need to extract it out of the soil, it might well do a good thing. Now when it comes to heavy metals and other toxic materials, some of them can be actually nullified by the hemp. Some of them are again stored, but stored in a fairly innocuous way. And some of them we think possibly we might be able to use in something that, again, Phil was talking about when he's talking about people ask, can we make graphene from hemp? And we don't need to make graphene, we can make something better because it's a naturally occurring, amazing surface area material that we now believe we can make into batteries that we can build houses out of. So that we can store the energy from the photocells on the roof in the walls. And that we can use hemp that maybe contains some of those toxic heavy metals and stuff that we don't want to be near our clothing or our food or in our ground, in those materials, because, well, they're sealed behind a lime plaster and they're just storing energy. So, yeah, I also think, just as a final point about phytoremediation, that using human waste, human sewage, as a fertilizer for hemp, to me is a great way of introducing humanship back into the food producing chain, because we have to, because we're throwing away all this incredible nutrient from our bodies and importing from the fossil fuel bank all these nitrogenous fertilizers from CO2 emitting gases. So we need to find an alternative to that. We're throwing away all this stuff, so we need to stop throwing it away. And if you grow a crop of hemp on a field that's had human waste put on it, even after just a year, you're, I think, able to then take out whatever things you might not need to do, or make them inert, and be able to use that land for food production immediately afterwards. So I think that's two aspects. The toxic stuff and the stuff that's not so toxic, but just to make everybody believe that, hey, it really is safe.
Okay, Steve, thank you very much.